Hey guys, Tyler here, and since I put up the walk around of my FJ, I've had several requests from people wondering how my hot water system works on here. So I just kind of wanted to go over that real quick. This will be a pretty short video. There's different water systems that'll heat with propane, like Julka sells one. There's some companies like that. But in an SUV of this size, it's kind of hard to fit something like that in here. And I don't have space for like a Pelican case to hold it. And I don't want to deal with setting it up in a rig like this. So what I did is I got a heat exchanger and an RV water pump, and it's actually a pretty straightforward process. This is a really easy setup, but it wasn't necessarily cheap just because I had to buy a lot of fittings, and it ended up costing me a couple $100s when it was all said and done. The pump was about 70 bucks if I remember correctly. I'll put the links for this stuff below. I plumbed this up in a way where I could go back to completely stock and put the clamps back on, and it wouldn't be an issue just in case anything ever leaked. So that way, even if this is leaking coolant at camp or something like that, I can disconnect it over there and I will be back to just stock and I won't have hot water, which isn't a big deal. I built this shower system for hunting because whenever I'm out there for days on end, in the situations that we're camped in the truck, it's very nice to be able to take a shower. So this is a really simple system. So I have an RV water pump, and on this water pump, there's a FlowJet model 035261144. This might be updated by now, so I will find this and put a link in. But all this thing does is basically I'll hook a hose to it, and then it connects over here to this heat exchanger. And a heat exchanger, for those of you that don't know, the best way to kind of explain what a heat exchanger does is it's like a radiator. It's like the radiator in your vehicle, but instead of having air go through it to cool off the liquid, it will let another fluid go through it. So right here, this is going to be water, and on this side, this is coolant. The vehicle runs exactly the same as it normally would. Coolant comes in from the engine after it's been heated up. It comes out of the bottom, back on another hose, and goes back to where it was stock. Right here is where my hose will go into, and this is plumbed in through the water pump. So all I got to do is turn this thing on, and the engine does have to be running. That's the downside. I usually try to take showers in the evening just because the truck has already been heated up. That way I don't have to warm it up in the morning, just because it's a waste of fuel if I'm out in the middle of nowhere. So a downside to this for a lot of you will be that this is just using river water. I'm not using fresh water. You could use fresh water, but with the FJ Cruiser, I can't really carry that much extra water because I am just fully loaded all the time. So Colorado has clear waters for the most part, so I just use the water, scoop some out in a bucket, and then this is how I do the process. So on this side, I have a hose, a short length of hose with a fitting that came with the water pump, and then this is just a strainer to keep like anything from going inside of the pump that shouldn't be in there. It's kind of discolored, but anyway, it's got a metal screen in there. That screws in, keeps everything out of the pump, prolongs the life of the pump. I plug this in right here. This is the output. So I'll screw my hose on there. I got one of these hoses that expands. And the reason I did that is it's just lighter. It takes up less space in my spare tire trash bag. And then on the end of it, I just bought an Amazon sprayer, and this one can actually lock on. This hose also has a flow control valve here, so I can turn the pressure down, which will also make it to where the water heats up faster, because the longer the water sits inside of the heat exchanger, the more it's going to collect the heat from the engine. And this hose will expand to the point where I can get over to the shower tent whenever I'm actually using it. So this is an RV water pump, and it automatically turns on whenever the pressure is low, and then once it's built pressure, it automatically turns itself off. And because I just discovered this has a water leak for the first time, and I think I've had this on here for 4 years, it's losing pressure, so it keeps priming itself. So I've got full water pressure. Normally I carry a collapsible bucket, but what you do is you fill your bucket up with water, and then like I'll go scoop water out of like the cleanest, in Colorado water and rivers and stuff is super clean. So I'll scoop out a bucket of water, and it usually takes about a bucket per person to take a shower. And then what I do is I just let the hose cycle while the engine's running. And I'll stick that in there, and it'll sit there and it'll cycle for a while. And what'll happen is as it cycles, it's gonna heat up more and more. So what's happening is the water's going through the heat exchanger. I have the FJ off right now, but for a normal situation, the FJ will be running, it'll be cycling the water, and it'll slowly heat this up. Your engine has to be running because you need coolant going through the heat exchanger as the water goes through, because basically it's just stealing heat from the engine. And the coolant and the water never mix, of course. I don't have a thermometer or anything. I just go off of if it feels hot enough, that's what I'm gonna use. And then when it's ready, you can just turn your hose off, and this thing will build pressure back up. This stretches out enough to where I can make it over to my shower awning, and then I just hang that up on the shower awning. Part of the reason I have a sprayer like this, it's a little bigger and a little heavier, but the advantage is you have a mist mode, which will save a ton of water, and if it's too hot, because this thing will get the water, if you leave the water cycling for too long, it will get it as hot as your engine, which is 170 to 180 degrees depending on the truck. And so having the mist mode will stop it from scalding you. So that's something to know. And like I said, there's downsides to this system. It's a very primitive system. It works for me. It wouldn't work for everybody, but you could mix in colder water with this. It's kind of a hassle to do that. I try to just nail it, get it the right temperature, or have it a little cooler than I would like. That way I don't have to worry about burning myself. But whenever I go to take a shower, I turn the FJ off, because if you have everything off like it is right now, we have pressure here, and all of that water that's sitting inside of the heat exchanger right now is going to get extremely hot. So the downside there is, while you're showering, if you're not using water for a minute, and then all of a sudden you turn this back on, in the next few minutes you're going to get one piece of water, one section of water coming through here that's just way too hot. So it's kind of a learning curve, and that's part of the reason why I turn the FJ off whenever I'm taking a shower, so it's not producing more heat. In my next truck, I will go with a propane type of system, just because I got used to it with the camper, and it is a nice setup. But with a vehicle this size, I just don't have room for it. I'm packed out. My camera stuff takes up too much room. So this is what I use, and I don't use it that often. If we go on a 5-day trip, I'll use it maybe once or twice. I've used this to spray off dishes before too, with something like that, and it'll clean a dish super easy, super quick. And that's only if I already have it set up, because it takes a minute to set it up, and I usually don't mess around too much with it. But I'll clean dishes with this, and then I'll just put it back on the burner to cook off any potential like bacteria or giardia, something like that. I'll kill the little boogers with some propane heat. But I've used this for showering. I've used it for about 4 or 5 years now, and it's worked really well. And like I said, the leak that I can hear dripping right now, it's the first time it's leaked. I don't ever winterize this or anything. I just go with the flow. Anyway, it's been a good system, and it works for me. It's not going to work for everybody, but I've had a few questions on how that system works. So it's as simple as that. It's a heat exchanger, some fittings, and a length of hose from Napa. And then you buy a few garden hoses. And I have this section short just because it's less to carry, it's less weight to carry. The extra hose is unnecessary. And with a system like this, you're not going to just throw it in the water like in a creek or something and use it, because it has to go through that heat exchanger so many times before it's the right temperature. You could get a bigger heat exchanger, but in my use with this thing, I wouldn't want that. When I first got it, I thought a bigger heat exchanger would work better, because then you could do something like that. It could probably pass through the bucket of water once and be hot, which is good. But either way, it's going to be hard to attain a certain temperature. And I think with a bigger heat exchanger, you'd have to worry more about burning yourself. And if you wanted to cycle it like this, it would be more of a hassle. And it's a lot heavier, because they're 2 to 3 times as thick as the one that I got. So I think for the FJ, for a setup like this, I'm only going to make it so many days out of a small vehicle like this. So I think this is fine. I've used it for all sorts of things. You can blast off mud if you're getting heavy with mud or something like that. And I've cleaned my solar panels off before with this. So it's nice for a few different things, rinsing sand off you, whatever it is. Pretty neat system. It's really simple, but it works for me. The heat exchanger was like $30 or $40 on Amazon. The pump was like, I want to say 70 or 80. I built a handmade, I have a handmade mount for this that's held up just out of aluminum. And then the switches and the electronics, I mean, I put a relay system in there. On 2-week trips and stuff, it's nice to actually have clean, fresh water to shower with rather than creek water. If it were just me, I'd be completely fine with this, but your significant other may not appreciate the river water consistently. All right, so that sums up my shower system on this. It's super simple, super easy. This has worked for me for several years. This isn't the greatest setup. This isn't going to be something I'm going to use on a daily basis. I don't always have access to water. If I go to Utah or something, I've carried extra water before, just because I know, especially in Utah, that dirt just gets all over anything. So we'll carry about 2 gallons per person. For halfway through the trip, we can take a shower at some point just to get the sand out of our eyes. So something like this is nice, but I only use it so often, and I would like to have a better shower setup on the next rig, but for now this works really good. And then I've got the shower tent on the side of the truck, and that works great for me. So that's my shower setup, guys. I hope that was helpful for some of you. And if you have any questions, drop them below. I'll put some links for some of this stuff in case you want to build your own system. You essentially have unlimited hot water, especially if you're pulling out of like a creek or something. So that's what I got for you. Thank you guys for watching as always, and until next time.